Welcome to Thought Leaders, featuring interviews with some of the best minds in the industry. Today's special guest is popular platform speaker and trial lawyer, Ilya Lerma. Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and talk show host. In this segment, we're talking about why client interviews should include note-taking to insulate your practice in arbitration, all from Ilya's best practices taken from her popular keynote addresses and seminars. Well, Ilya, you know, you are a trial lawyer. You see mistakes made in insurance professionals all the time. I don't mean to just say there. I mean, registered investment advisors, security license. But a lot of times we are just, I don't know how, I can't do it anymore as I'm older. I have to take notes. I'm forced to take notes just because of my age. But I've noticed that when I was younger, I never took notes. You know, I had this down. It's in the application. You know, why do I have to go out of my way to take notes? And I can I say this for my gender? We are not a gender of note takers. Okay, I'm just saying from a guy's point of view, I don't think we're really detailed. I don't think we know how to do stenography. So we just kind of blow it off. But how important is this? If we go to arbitration or a worst case scenario, we're in court.
Well, it's, again, cases are going to be about what evidence is in your file, and you're going to have a much different recollection of what you told your client than what the client recalls. Mm-hmm. And that's just the simple truth of the matter. The client is going to remember certain things their own way. That's a natural product of the way our brains process information. And so you may think you may have effectively communicated and made a connection with the client when in fact it looked more like this. So there's a disparity between the information you're trying to convey and what your client is actually receiving. So even though you may remember saying it, your client may not have actually received that information. So documentation, where a client has an opportunity to go back and review if you've confirmed it in some type of letter or you've documented it in your file to say that this is part of my standard script. I said it in this case, absolutely, I said it on this date. That's evidence in your favor that's going to cut against any kind of claim against you.
So what I just heard, I just want to make sure I heard this right, because remember you just said we don't hear exactly the same.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure I heard this right. So I've taken notes, and I'm now going to send a letter, thank you for meeting with me today, and here's the notes that I took. Is there anything here that I misconstrued or misunderstood?
Right. One of my favorite lines as a lawyer is, if anything in this letter is not commensurate with your understanding, please let me know. You know, that puts an affirmative duty on the recipient of that letter to let you know if what you've put down in that letter accurately or does not accurately reflect what was discussed in your conversation.
Well, after talking to you just now, I'm thinking about maybe I should take my summary notes, add it to my engagement letter, especially if it's the first contact interview, right? I think I should add that to it. I think it just bolsters it.
Well, it certainly does. And again, you know, a lot of people, I think, start to worry that, boy, this just sounds like so much note-taking, and I just don't have the time, and we're all busy. But the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of tools, apps, resources that you can learn to use that make you very efficient, but also document your file. The thing about documentation is 9 times out of 10, actually even more than that, 99% of the time, you're never going to need that documentation. But it's like a parachute. You're sure going to wish you had it when you really need it.
Well, that brings me to my favorite. I mean, we're living in 2015. Why can't I record this? Why can't I just use an audio record?
Well, you certainly could, and there's nothing to stop you if you have storage, electronic storage, and you have an app that you particularly like and that's useful. But I don't necessarily know that that's the most efficient use of resources for any practitioner, because you're going to end up with hours and hours of recordings of every individual client. Documentation becomes most important when you're dealing with issues of substance. A lot of times conversations with clients are catching up on their life events, their goals, their objectives. And while those may be important, you know, a 15-minute conversation about what's important to them can probably summarily described in a short paragraph of notes on a small legal pad.
Well, you just brought up something as well, because I think, and especially I think male advisors, we're into collecting the data and the data only. We're not really personable. We're not social. we're really just not built that way.
I disagree. You're very charming.
You think? Well, that would be your host, Steve Savant, who is very, by the way, very gallant. Okay, so but I mean, I'm thinking when I was in my practice, I'm trying to get to the points. I'm a math guy. I'm doing all the mechanical issues. being pastoral, having a kind of a sense of social contact with my client is somewhat foreign to a lot of advisors because they're very, very, what I would call, I would say maybe factual based in the way they interview. But you're suggesting, and when I hear you suggesting, I know that others are not. They take them out for coffee. How are you doing? How are your children? They're very personable. They have pastoral. They have a counseling kind of side to their practice. And do I need to kind of maybe talk about that?
Well, you have to remember, again, how is your client, how is the principal interpreting your relationship? They're putting someone in charge of their money, their finances, their future, their security. They're putting you in charge, and you may be seen as somebody who has a significant relationship with them. Whether or not the agent actually has that in their mindset, this is just another one of hundreds of other clients, who knows? But they have to be thinking of what the actual client is receiving, and they're going to be thinking, I've got a relation, oh, my guy, I've had him for 15 years, let me send you to my guy. And there's a personal draw that principal has to someone that they've been with and been affiliated with for 15 years. It goes much more beyond financial advisors. And that's why when you're talking about the context of a claim against a producer or an agent or broker, you're not just looking at the transactional part. The client is going to be looking at the relationship, the security that they felt, the trust that they put in this one particular individual. And that's actually what a trial attorney is going to be talking about. The transaction is one part, but if you've been in charge of a family's finances for 20 years and something significant happens where they feel unprotected, a good trial attorney is going to tell the story not of that single transaction, but they're going to give the scope of a 20-year history where your client was led down the primrose path to believe he was safe, he was secure, and then bottomed out because of something you neglected to do.
Well, maybe I don't want to be the quarterback of my client's concerns. I don't know. For more information on how notes and interviews can protect your practice, just click on the landing page address in the video description. We'll be right back with more from Ilya Lerma.
This is your website. Few people visit, and if it isn't attracting new visitors, it's not doing its job. Now you can drive more visitors to your website through dynamic content and email marketing with CreativeOne's Social Media Elite. Capture quality leads faster and easier. Engage your visitors with informative articles and videos to boost your online credibility. Plus, stay connected with existing clients and earn more referrals. All content is customized for you. It's time to introduce your website to the world. Call your CreativeOne sales team at 800-992-2642 or visit us online at creativeone.com.
In this segment, we're talking about collecting the right financial information to draw up a good engagement letter, all from Ilya's best practices taken from her popular keynote addresses and seminars. Well, I'm thinking, and I'm just trying to confess kind of the sins of my youth here. I collected everything. I should have given a receipt. I took policies with me. I took statements. I just really didn't understand the real charge as a fiduciary that was being placed in my hands to take care of that information. Number one, to make sure it didn't get to anybody else, to really protect it so that there would be no data breach, anything like that back in the day. I'm very much more hip to that now. But I've noticed that financial information, and you're talking about a person's wallet, you're opening their purse, their heart, their money issues. Absolutely. And so we're just thinking we're collecting data, but it's more than that. So you're looking at a person's savings, you're looking at what they spend on. And if you're doing any debt management especially, you're looking at all the things that they spend on a regular basis. So when I'm looking at documents, my first thought was, should I sign a non-disclosure statement for client information? I mean, I think I need to tell them I'm not going to share this with anybody just to bring some solace to the client. This is going to stay private between the client and myself.
Well, I think before you do that, you want to go back and sort of take a broad scope of this fiduciary relationship. So let's talk about that first. So the fiduciary relationship is really that's sort of a broad definition of the duty of loyalty and care to put the principal's interest before your own. And that's sort of the governing general principle in agency law. And then what standards are applied to that is what's reasonable. And what's reasonable is it's kind of an arbitrary standard. You you don't have a bright line rule about what should be applied as reasonable. That's why we can't say in 100% of cases you need to do A, you need to do this in the situation B. It's not real clear. So there's a reasonableness standard that needs to be applied to the conduct of the agent, the broker. It's from that reasonableness that policies stem from. Your own internal policies, corporate policies, those are developed to be reasonable because a juror who's examining the conduct of a broker or an agent is going to be saying, well, was it reasonable? They're going to be looking at various things and applying their own life experiences. They're going to think, my office has office policies regarding security protocol. I'm not allowed to take my laptop. I have security passwords and measures that we have to take. Why doesn't this guy have these in his office? Why aren't these in place? When developing policies, and you should sit down and actually develop office policies, if you don't have corporate policies that are governing for you, you need to be thinking about what would a reasonable person consider as appropriate? Are your file cabinets unlocked? Do people other than your office staff, perhaps cleaning crews or maybe computer people, do you share office suites? Right now, very popular is executive suite sharing. You want to make sure that your information is not going to be exposed to people who are outside of your agency. And so when you have an appropriate policy in place regarding record keeping, safety measures, security, data breaches, those types of things, once you have policies in place, then you can discuss with the client whether or not you want to have a non-disclosure agreement. Across the board, do you want to do that? If a client comes to you and says, I want a non-disclosure, I don't want to give you this information to anybody, you got to make sure you're going to be able to enforce that. If you've got a new hiree in your staff and they release information that the client would not be in agreement with, what security measures do you have to guard against that for your new staff person to know that this client, don't send any information out until we get something in writing? So you have to have policies in place before you can agree to, before you want to have any kind of non-disclosure agreement.
Well, let's say that I'm trying to think of you've used the word 6 times, I think, if I counted it correctly, reasonable. You kept saying reasonable. So I'm thinking that my advisors, we all think we're reasonable. And I'm but you're a trial lawyer, so whatever I think is reasonable may not necessarily be very reasonable. So I'm looking at HR protection, human resource protocols in my office that would help me go down that road, right? So I'm thinking of who's touching this. Well, my receptionist probably doesn't need to really touch this, but my personal assistant maybe yes. They're going to be making copies. They're going to be writing the letters to the client. They're going to be checking these things. And in some securities, you have to have them vetted just because of that issue. And I'm thinking, especially for insurance, because you're collecting not only financial information, you're collecting health information. And some of that stuff on the Part 2, some of that information Part 2 is very personal. And you can't have that getting out at all. So I'm thinking some of the last couple times I've seen arbitration agents in charge has been because of health issues that got out because of an application. And more than that, hey, I'm working on a big case. This guy's huge. He starts talking about it at the cocktail hour, and all of a sudden we got major problems.
Right. And you definitely want to avoid those. And you're correct. I mean, reasonableness is subject to interpretation. And it's going to be applied differently in different circumstances. You may be well in line with the same conduct as the rest of your colleagues. Maybe none of you is taking any notes. Maybe none of you has a complete engagement letter. Maybe none of you is sending follow-up correspondence. But you're not going to be the audience judging the reasonableness. Who's going to be judging it is outside people from the community, and they're going to be applying standards that they know. So what if they're engineers? What if they're pilots? What if they're people who are used to dealing with safety nets and checklists and protocols and procedures, and you don't have any of those in place? You are going to look unreasonable. And the fact of the matter is that even if a recommendation you made to a particular client might be reasonable, not subject to them to any harm, if it looks like it was self-dealing or it appears inappropriate for some reason, you could still be found liable because to an outside perspective, that appearance of impropriety, which is a term of art that lawyers use a lot, that appearance of impropriety is going to make it seem as though you were self-dealing. So you have to be very careful that when you're examining reasonableness, it's not from your eyes, it's from the eyes of an outside third-person juror who's going to be looking at your conduct and the plaintiff as the victim.
Well, for more information on best practices when collecting financial information, just click on the landing page address in the video description. And for more information on all our shows, seminars, and workshops, just follow us out on social media or visit us out on our webpage. I'm Steve Savant. We'll see you next time on Thought Leaders. And remember, keep thinking outside the box.